Joy tells me that my thoughts are positive. I'm in a good space, so keep it up. So we're not really going to explore that because it really speaks for itself. I'm thinking positive thoughts about the situation, and my nervous system is responding with the related hormones and chemicals and peptides, and I feel good. The next one is anger. These, by the way, are motivating emotions because they motivate me to certain actions. In other words, they help me to take certain actions to address the emotion should it be problematic in any way. The message in anger is that there is a sense of violation. There's a sense of imposition. Something is being demanded of me. Something is being forced onto me. My sense of self-determination is affected, and I'm beginning to feel I don't really have a say. And the stress hormones that are released as a result of this narrative, the story that I'm telling myself in response to a situation that there's been some form of violation, releases certain stress hormones, and I feel anger. And the message there is some violation, and what is the solution? Establish clear boundaries, communicate. In a future session, we will explore a little bit more about some of the techniques and tools, how to implement or how to work on these solutions. So if I feel a sense of violation, that is the problem. What is the solution? Communicate boundaries, find ways to put clearer boundaries in place, and you will experience less violation. Sadness. I'm telling myself a sad story of disappointment, of unmet expectations, of dashed hopes, of being let down. And the stress hormones that are released are the result create a feeling of sadness. So what is the message? Well, maybe I need to practice a little bit more forgiveness. I need to practice some compassion, some understanding. People are human. I'm human. Therefore, we're all prone to mistakes. We're all prone to letting each other down. And if I can keep that in mind, I can be a bit more forgiving, and I will experience less disappointment. And in turn, I will experience less sadness. Next one is fear. Fear tells me there is some kind of a threat. There is some kind of risk. There's something that I need to pay attention to. There's some caution that is required. I need to pay attention. I need to practice some awareness. Now, the interesting process that takes place is that if I have healthy boundaries, I'm less inclined to be triggered by anger. I'm going to experience less violation or imposition. As a result of clear boundaries, I will be less inclined to experience disappointment. I'll be less inclined to experience being let down because I'm able to communicate what I will allow myself to experience and what not, and what I will allow others to do and what not, which may in turn, as I said, reduce the risk of feeling let down and feeling disappointed. And I can also then, because of my boundaries, remind myself, as I said, that people are human, and I'm able to practice a bit more compassion and forgiveness. And if I have clear boundaries, I walk in a place of compassion, I'll feel less threatened, I'll feel less insecure. So it's quite interesting to see how all these emotions, all these messages actually link up with each other. And of course, the main aim and the main goal with our emotional state is to move as close to joy as we can, as close to contentment and satisfaction and peacefulness. And we achieve that through really getting the messages that are being relayed by the emotions that we may be inclined to label as negative, and process our emotions in relation to what we're experiencing. Just a couple of thoughts on how do I process my emotions. First of all, allow myself to feel the emotion. Right now, I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling sadness, or I'm feeling fear. And then allow myself to feel the feeling. Really, really allow myself to feel the feeling. Maybe share it with somebody, or show the emotion by crying, whatever it may be, or writing it down. Really important to feel the emotion. And from there, ask the question, what is going on in my thinking? What is going on inside of me? What is my body reacting to? What is my narrative right now? What is the story I'm telling myself? Really, really important to practice these steps as part of our emotional resolution and emotional processing. We're going to look at the next category of emotions, which I refer to as debilitating emotions. They no longer really carry messages of motivation for action. And the reason is that we have sort of descended down the list of emotions. Our narrative, our story, our meaning has become more and more negative, which means an increase in stress hormones in the brain, which means an increase in negative emotion, which means an increase in cognitive impairment. I'm less able to think clearly. I'm less able to think of solutions, and I'm becoming more desperate. And this is where we start to experience hurt, guilt, and shame. What is the difference between hurt and sadness? Well, hurt is a lot deeper than sadness in that I'm beginning to feel rejection. I'm beginning to feel isolation. And the reason for that is that I have not found a way to resolve the prior emotions when I started to feel sadness, when I started to feel fear, or anger for that matter. And I kept on internalizing a more and more negative narrative. My emotions became more and more negative. And I'm now at a stage where it's very difficult for me to see the message, and it's very difficult for me to think logically and rationally. And as I said, this is where feelings of rejection, isolation step in. I feel pushed aside. I feel lonely, and a very, very negative place to be in. The hurt can then turn into guilt, because now I start to question, what have I done? Have I done something? Have I been so bad? And this is where I may be inclined to beat myself up for things I may have done, or things that I may think I may have done. And I become very unforgiving towards myself. Now, this is not guilt. I feel bad because I did something wrong. This is where I really beat myself up, and I'm unable to process the self-guilt, the resentment towards myself. And again, I keep spiraling deeper and deeper into this pit of negative feelings, negative emotional state. That then turns into shame, feeling bad about who I am, feeling worthless. I just want to say a few things about shame. Shame is the place where a lot of people at least start to consider suicide, because it's a place of hopelessness. Not only have I done things wrong, but I'm faulty. There's something wrong with me. Uh, People deserve better than me. I don't deserve any good in life. And that feeling of desperation causes huge impairment within the rational brain, because of basically the flooding, the stress hormones, and the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that dramatically increases. And the person desperately starts to look for a way out. And this is very often where the thought of suicide comes into play. Suicide meaning an end to my pain. This is where people ask the question, is suicide an act of bravery, or is suicide an act of cowardice? It is neither. Suicide is an act of desperation to find a way to put an end to the suffering. And then also people who have survived, loved ones who have committed suicide, would say something like, the person seemed to be doing so much better lately. There was a time where they were going through difficulty, but there seemed to be more peace. And the reason for that could be because once they made the decision to put an end to the suffering, there was a level of peace. There was a slight reduction in the stress hormones within the brain. However, they were still stuck in this negativity and were not able to get out of it. So how do I deal with this situation if I find myself where I'm in this deep-seated shame, feeling bad, feeling hopeless? Well, work my way back. I'm really feeling bad right now, and I feel worthless, and I am nothing, and I'm a nobody. Is there anything maybe that I've done, or is there anything that I think I may have done to make me feel this way? Do I need to maybe be a bit more forgiving towards myself? What is making me feel this guilt? Well, I've been hurt. People reject me. People push me aside. So there must have been something that I've done. So the hurt, what preceded the hurt? What made you feel the hurt? Because I just started to feel so insecure. I started to feel so isolated. I started to feel so threatened. I started to feel that nobody liked me. Well, what preceded that? Just a lot of disappointment. People continuously let me down. People continuously disappoint me. Well, what could have preceded that? Well, now I realize that maybe I did not have clear enough boundaries in place. I allowed people to do things that maybe I should not have allowed myself to experience. You can see how if we understand these processes and understand these messages, how we can actually utilize this process to create a better understanding for ourselves of what is happening and find a way to process our emotions or help others with it, for that matter. We often hear about EQ, emotional maturity or emotional intelligence. What is that? Well, we can maybe give a whole scientific definition of what EQ is, but there are just a few basic principles that really explain what EQ really is all about. Well, how do I practice emotional maturity or emotional intelligence or EQ? And as I've mentioned earlier on, acknowledge and feel the emotion. I feel feelings of shame. I feel feelings of guilt. Now, if I can just give some advice, avoid I am. The moment I say I am angry or I am sad, I basically put myself into a state that may be difficult to get out of. My emotions do not define who I am. I am not angry. I feel anger. It moves from a place of subjectivity, being stuck in the emotion, to a place of objectivity where I can observe the emotion. I feel anger. I feel frustration. Don't label the emotion. Refrain from labeling or judging it as good or bad. Because if I think it is wrong to feel angry, I may try to find a way to escape the anger or to suppress the anger or deny the anger, which may contribute more towards me acting out on the anger eventually because I've suppressed it. So don't label the emotion. It's not a good emotion. It's not a bad emotion. It is a message from my body, from my nervous system, an opportunity to become aware of what's going on in my mind. Explore the thought causing the emotion. What is the narrative? What is the thought? What is the story that I'm telling myself? If somebody said something that really caused me emotional pain, and as I always remind us of, that emotional pain that I feel is 10% the result of the person's actions and 90% the meaning-making and feeling process within my mind. The story I'm telling myself about what happened and the reaction of my body through biochemicals that make me feel what it is. So what am I thinking? What is the story that I'm telling myself? Is it true? There's sort of an acronym for the word think that can be very useful in this particular instance. The story that I'm telling or the thought that I'm having, is it true? Is it really true that happened, or is it my interpretation of it? Am I being honest in this thought, or am I making up stories? Is it inspirational, what I'm thinking, or is it negative? Is it breaking me down? Is it necessary to think this thought? Am I rehashing the same old, same old? Is it kind? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being kind to others in this thinking? And if I'm able to go back to the thinking process, what happens is I keep my prefrontal cortex active, and it helps me to process the thought And that will have an impact on my emotions, and it will bring more of a balance between my thinking and my emotions. And explore the messages from the emotion. What is the problem that the emotion pointed out to me, or the challenge or the situation that I needed to be aware of? And what are the messages that this particular emotion relayed to me? Where do I need to put in boundaries? Where do I need to practice more compassion and forgiveness? Where do I need to practice more caution? How do I avoid getting to a place of hurt by exercising caution, by exercising forgiveness and compassion towards others and towards myself, and by exercising healthy boundaries? And that will avoid me spiraling into guilt and into shame. So the balance between my thinking and my feeling, the awareness of the meaning making and feeling making process that creates my emotions, is a sign of maturity, is a sign of emotional intelligence. And more than that, it also helps me to experience a greater sense of peace and a more empowering and resourceful emotional state. IQ plus EQ equals success, as we've said. IQ, which has for many years was the idea of my intelligence. Now, at the risk of being criticized, I do not believe in IQ, in the sense that I don't believe in a person is either born with an IQ or develops an IQ, and that is where they stay. And this is coming from somebody who was diagnosed with learning difficulties and disabilities, performed average to below average at school, was told that I was unintelligent, really believed it, and really battled in studying. And somewhere along the line, I started to realize that that was a lot of BS, that I could increase my ability to learn, my ability to concentrate, and which is what I did. And I'm able to teach and lecture and share and help others today with learning difficulties and learning challenges. So I developed my own IQ, I believe, my own potential for learning when I start to practice EQ, when I become more aware of my thinking, what is going on inside my mind, and the emotions that result from my thinking. And there is a process called neuroplasticity. Which implies the brain's ability to form new patterns, new pathways, new networks. And that basically increases my potential for whatever it is that I desire in my life as well. And that is all the result of consciously, actively paying attention to my thinking, and consciously and actively paying attention to my emotions, and learning or receiving the messages from my emotion, and learning what is going on in my thinking, and taking a level of control in that, and really, as I said, in the whole process, create a far more positive emotional state and sense of well-being. Well, that is all for our session for tonight. I hope you found some value in it. Should anybody like to inquire about some additional online coaching, as I said, maybe there's something in tonight's session that you were able to relate to or would like to get some more information, you're welcome to send a message to me at john.ttklife@gmail.com. I offer a free half-an-hour online session where we look at what the situations that you're facing, and I'll tell you what I offer, and you can make a decision from there whether you would like to enter into a coaching relationship with me. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for this opportunity of allowing me to share some thoughts and ideas with you. And I really want to encourage you to really practice what we've looked at tonight. The whole idea of that there is no positive or negative emotion, but I can learn from my emotions as they serve as an indicator of what's going on in my thinking. So I wish you all the success in the world on your continued journey of growth and discovery. God bless you.